It's been just over 1 week since Vice President Kamala Harris lost the 2024 presidential election. Up until Election Day, Democrats said they were confident they could win, as polls continue to show a razor-close race. But now the party is left picking up the pieces after losses in the presidential race and both houses of Congress. Joining me now is Cate Martel, reporter here at The Hill and author of the 1230 Report newsletter. Cate, a Republican trifecta in Washington means a trifecta of losses for Democrats. There are hot takes galore coming out right now. Everybody has an opinion of what happened. What are you hearing inside Democratic circles, maybe just about like what they didn't see coming in this election?
Yeah, Drew, I think there's two things that Democrats missed from all the postmortems that we've heard and a lot of the blaming that's going on Capitol Hill is polling. Polling for months has been telling us that both immigration and the economy were the top issues of voters. And I think a really key mistake that Vice President Harris made is on the campaign trail when she was repeatedly asked what she would do differently in her administration from President Biden. She didn't have a good answer to that. She did try to walk it back towards the end, but at the end of the day, those were two major issues that really concerned voters. And she didn't have a great answer. She will always be connected to the Biden administration, wasn't able to pull back from that. And she also was leaned in heavily to celebrities. That's a big criticism that I'm hearing, that we had the big star celebrity endorsements. You had Taylor Swift, you had Beyonce, but like
Democrats
some Democrats,
always do that.
They do. And then at the end of the day, it's the working class voter that won it for President-elect Trump.
The infighting has kind of begun within the Democratic Party over how this all played out and then how to move forward. What would you say are the factions that are starting to form within the Democratic Party as they move forward?
Yeah, so I think one of the major factions is how do we change our messaging and communicate properly with working class voters? That's, I think, that's the biggest argument that I'm hearing from some Democrats. But there's also certain Democrats that are saying that, maybe we need to change our messaging on how we talk about the transgender community, that they think that these social issues and these quote-unquote woke issues are what ended up costing them that ultimately. Then also there's this other faction of Democrats, Drew, that are saying we can't overcorrect, that this was going to be a really hard race for her to win, and if we go change everything about the Democratic Party, then it's going to be really hard in the next midterms to walk back from that, because they do still have some of their base. So there's this big disagreement between, do we need to change things, or was this just a tough set of circumstances and we need to ride it out and wait until 2026 and try to win back some of these seats?
I want to ask you about Alex Jones. He's back in the news. The satirical news company, The Onion, won a bankruptcy auction for control over Jones's media company, which includes Infowars, where Jones and others regularly peddled wild conspiracies. Remind us how Jones ended up in bankruptcy, and what the heck is The Onion going to do with Infowars?
Well, Alex Jones got himself in this debacle because he was spreading baseless claims over the Sandy Hook shooting. And he was claiming it was a hoax. And several of the families of the victims actually then sued him for defamation. They were successful, and now Alex Jones had to find a way to pay nearly $1.5 billion in damages. So part of that step, he declared bankruptcy and had to liquidate some of his personal finances. But a major part of that came from The Onion in funding now by purchasing Infowars. What we hear that they're going to do from it is we think that they're going to turn it into a parody of what Infowars has been. So we know The Onion as being a big satirical force and cracking jokes at, politicians' expenses. So I think we're expecting them to make a parody of how we know Infowars and take The Onion's voice and maybe have some content that is critiquing and rebuking some of this right-wing conspiracy theories that we're hearing, and turn it around and make it into a messaging that will be less right-wing and more towards the center.
Something that the Sandy Hook family is apparently approved of as well. So, all right, Cate Martel, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate your insight.
Thanks, Drew.
President-elect Trump says he wants to fulfill his campaign promise to rein in government spending, announcing this week his allies, billionaire Elon Musk and former Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy, as the heads of a new Department of Government Efficiency. The stated goal, streamline government spending. But by tapping the two billionaires, questions arise over how much power they will actually wield and how the department will operate. Joining me now is the Hill's technology reporter, Miranda Nazzaro, to help make sense of the roadblocks they could face. Thanks for coming on, Miranda. The plan is to have this new Department of Efficiency partner with the White House to drive large-scale structural reform. Their words. Trump even touted it as the Manhattan Project of our time. I'm wondering, though, if after they spend a couple years doing this, Congress just doesn't take it and put it on the table and say, that's nice, but we're the one who make the rules.
Right, so I think you're not alone in that prediction. Basically, this is an outside of government panel, so this is not, even though it's called a department, it's not creating a new federal agency. It's basically an advisory panel. So they state that they are working on slashing government costs as well as slashing just government red tape, etc. However, at the end of this 21 months, I think it is, they're going to produce a report that they're going to be working with the White House Office Budget and Management Group. And with that, they believe that the OMB does not have to actually take their recommendations. And even if they do, those have to be presented to Congress, which also is not obligated in any way to take up those recommendations. So it still remains unclear if they have any real power per se. If anything, it's going to be just recommendations.
I guess it'll all depend on how much Congress wants to listen to what they come up with. Elon, during the campaign, had talked about $2 trillion cutting from the federal budget. That's a huge amount that would cause massive heartburn watching across the country, really. Is that the target for that?
Right. I think part of that was campaign talk. It's $2 trillion. When you hear the number, it emits a lot of emotions as it is. And I don't think that will ever be realistic. Musk has also acknowledged that even with these drastic cuts, the economy could see a short-term shift and problems with that. So I don't think that will actually be accomplished. And again, even if that is what they recommend, I have very little hopes that the Congress would ever go along with that.
Especially since I'm wondering, Republicans are going to have control of the House, but the majority is very slim, and you have some vulnerable members in Congress, and taking a sledgehammer to big government programs could be unpopular in their districts.
Right, yeah. I think we see House GOP has a very slim majority, and as a result, those more moderate Republicans are going to need to also be feeding to the more independent voters in their districts, as you mentioned. And I think that with having such a slim majority, it only takes a few to sink any sort of legislation that they want to pass. And with the Senate, they haven't reached that filibuster number. So even though the Senate GOP has a majority as well, it's also unlikely that all of these recommendations would make it through. In general, the majority is just not enough for it to be an overwhelming change for Trump.
Let's talk about AI policy. President-elect Trump is promising to reverse this executive order from the Biden administration that put guardrails around AI technology. There's been a lack of congressional action on it. What impact do you think removing those guardrails through that executive order would have?
Right, so that was pretty much the only thing Trump has said on AI so far is the repealing of this executive order. And with that, our best prediction is that we're going to see a lot of deregulation, and as a result, some groups think that this will lead to more quote-unquote innovation for AI, so we could see AI develop a lot quicker. Now Trump has made clear he wants us to keep up with our competitors in China, so we may see quicker development, but with that we could also see some of the risks come out. We could see faulty software, we could see it being deployed for harmful reasons, whether that's hackers using it or being used in weapons. So I think that the risks that come with quicker and less regulated development are definitely there. Also, he's thinking of we believe he's thinking of scaling back funding, which should he do that, there's going to be less money focused on research, and as a result, again, less guardrails, less regulation. So we also could see the big dogs in AI kind of rise to the top quicker, where those more startup companies are probably going to fizzle out a little more.
Don't have much time left, but it's interesting that the tech companies are pushing for less regulation to open up innovation, because I remember for months they were talking about we need regulation to prevent the worst from possibly happening. Is that a change of mind?
I think that there is just a lot of debate among Silicon Valley leaders in this regard. So while some are arguing for less regulation, there is still the camp that says, no, we need these guardrails in order for safety. Musk is actually one of them. Musk is actually a proponent of having at least some set of regulations for AI development. So I don't know, we could see Trump also take advice from Musk on that, as he owns an AI company. So it's a debate that Silicon Valley has not solved themselves.
New frontier. It'll be interesting to watch how the Trump administration handles it. Miranda Nazzaro, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
It's been nearly 2 months since Hurricane Helene slammed into Florida and ripped a trail of destruction through the southeastern U.S. Right now, parts of western Carolina and lower Appalachia are in shambles, and many are still without power. With winter approaching, residents say they are concerned about staying warm. News Nation's Brian Enton is on the ground in North Carolina with more.
There is still so much devastation here in western North Carolina. You don't realize it until you're here on the ground. We're in Swannanoa, which is a town outside Asheville. Take a look behind me. I mean, this is pretty much what the whole town looks like. There's still debris everywhere. The water came up here, covered the entire town. You can see buildings are gone. Parts of the road are still washed out. It's just a terrible situation. This is one of the main bridges in town, still closed and washed out. They're trying to do the repairs, but it's just a real mess out here. And it's been very, very frustrating for the people who live here, who tell me they don't feel like they're getting the help they need. We met so many people here whose homes were condemned. They were totally flooded or just washed away. The county came out and condemned the houses. And now the people who live there say they really have nowhere to go. Many of them are living in RVs not from the government or from FEMA, but from people who came to town and donated old RVs. So they put the RVs in their house and they live in them, or they are even living in tents. We saw a lot of people in tents, which is a real concern here because it is starting to get cold in North Carolina. Obviously, you know, the summer months are ending. It's been a month and a half since the hurricane. Winter is coming. It is now dipping into the 30s here at night, which is a real concern for the people in the tents and for the people in the RVs. And there are a lot of them. I don't even know how many, hundreds, thousands, just in this area alone. Power is also not on to some of those communities. In Asheville, the big city, the power's back on. They still don't have drinking water there, by the way, which is sort of shocking all this time later in a city like Asheville. But for the most part, Asheville is functioning. It's when you get out into these smaller towns in the mountains outside the main city that you realize there is still so much devastation and so much suffering here. Drew?
As President-elect Trump's cabinet takes shape, it includes early appointments of key leaders who could help implement the president's border policy, one of Trump's big priorities on the campaign trail. In today's Political Minute, News Nation Washington Bureau Chief Mike Vaquera overviews some of the people tapped to lead the border efforts.
Donald Trump's border team is starting to take shape. I'm Mike Vaquera with News Nation in Washington. Just more than a week after his election victory, President-elect Trump is already naming key people to lead his policies on the U.S.-Mexico border. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem is Trump's pick to lead the Department of Homeland Security. A rancher and farmer, Noem represented her state in Congress before becoming governor. Noem has been a fixture on the campaign trail for Trump. Trump has also chosen Tom Homan to serve as border czar. Homan was acting head of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency in President Trump's first administration and was a key proponent of that administration's zero-tolerance policy. Trump has promised his administration will make the U.S.-Mexico border a priority. Border encounters have risen over the past 4 years, hitting a high of 2.5 million last year. I'm Mike Vaquera, and this is the News Nation Political Minute.
And you can find more news and analysis from Mike and our colleagues 24/7 on News Nation. To find News Nation on your screen, go to joinnn.com. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Drew Petrimoulx. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.